Morning. Welcome to BCP Eastern Planning Committee for the 23rd of October 25. If we can do housekeeping first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please note this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off mics and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So first of all, agenda item number 1, apologies.
So we've received apologies from Councillor Joe Clements and Councillor David Flagg, and substitute members, Councillor Bernadette Nonovo is here for Councillor Clements today.
Thank you. So I'm Councillor Paul Hilliard. I'm the chair of the committee, and if I have officers and members introduce themselves.
I'm Marion Le Pedvin, Councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands, and I'm Vice Chair of this committee.
Councillor Michael Tarling for Christchurch Town.
Councillor Patrick Canavan, Buscombe West.
Joe Salmon, Moordown Ward.
Matt Gillett, Talbot Woods.
Councillor Bernadette Nonovo, East Southbourne and Chuckton.
Toby Slade, Muscap and Stratton Park.
George Sanders, Planning Officer.
Jenny James, Senior Planning Officer.
Simon Gould, Development Management Manager.
And Democratic Services Officer is Jill Hollyoak today. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of points today? Councillor Novo.
Agenda item number 1 is in my ward, and I will be speaking on that as the ward councillor. So I would like to step down for that one, please.
Councillor Starling.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a declaration of interest, but I have in previous roles reviewed and commented on applications related to the first application we've got, but on this application I have not given any views or opinions, so I don't consider myself predetermined.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And Councillor Dr. Phyllis C. Rice has also joined the meeting. Welcome. Item 4 is confirmation of a minute of 25th of September 2025. There was one correction from the draft minutes that the decision on 98 Gladstone Road East should read refuse and not grant. So with that alteration, are we happy to approve those minutes? Yep.
Agreed.
Those are agreed. Thank you. So number 5 is public issues. So after officer presentations, we will hear any public speaking followed by any ward councillors. So that leads us straight into item 6 and 6A is the Beach House Cafe, Muddyford Sandbank. So Ms. James.
Good morning. I am presenting the application for the Beach House Cafe in Muddyford on the Sandbank, and it is for a replacement cafe building that will be permanent. The location is on the sandbank here in the middle, where you can see the eye icon, and it is in the ward of East Southbourne and Tuckton. Here you can see the location and site plan. So the red line encompasses 2 parts: the main cafe building here. Sorry, I'm just going to get my pointer working. The main cafe building is the larger area, and then the smaller areas allocated for the bin store. This is an aerial view of the site, just introducing it more visually. And I just need to point out initially that this building in the purple circle is the existing beach shop, and it's outside of the proposal site. and this area here to the front contains picnic benches, and again, that is outside of the development site. Sorry, right. Sorry, it's just doing something funny. There we go. Initially, I need to make some clarifications for people considering this application today. There is a material fallback position, which is the extant permission, which is still valid, and it is valid until the 22nd of December. The application is very similar, and so we're looking at the differences and the relative impacts the differences might have. An application has recently been submitted to discharge the pre-commencement conditions that is in the system. It's yet to be validated. So it does form a realistic fallback position. The application is different to the current temporary offer on the site and seeks to rationalise and tidy the site with a visually and functionally improved offer. Any ad hoc huts or other points of sale or other development are not part of this application. There are some enforcement cases or investigations that are open at the moment. One involves picnic benches, but please note no picnic benches are approved within this application or indeed are able to be fitted within the red line. Anything outside of this application would need planning permission or a licence or a combination of both, and they would need to be considered separately. The beach shop, the existing beach shop, is also being investigated under planning enforcement for use as a hot food takeaway and some external alterations. It's a case of fact and degree, and enforcement are still looking at that and working on that. Also, the site is subject to a premises licence. This is being reviewed, and that's happening next month. Licensing is governed by other legislation and cannot be included within this assessment. Some matters are similar, but both conditions would still have to be complied with by any future operator. It's just important to keep these points in mind in this consideration of this application. Addendum updates. Paragraph 45 included information that is not relevant to this application regarding sauna. There is no sauna. That was an error. Paragraph 88 mentions DWT, which is the Dorset Wildlife Trust, and it was an abbreviation. Paragraph 52, the seafront strategy was adopted in 2022, but it needs to be added that it was updated in 2024, but that doesn't alter the content of the assessment. A later clarification that needs to be made is in regard to the public comments. In my report, the numbers stipulated are correct, and the difference to like the total tally that is visible on the public record is due to multiple comments being submitted by the same person, or whether more than one person from the same address submitted comments. And in some cases, comments that were labelled support comments also contained objection points, and so they had to be counted as objections as well. Other addendum updates. Condition 13, which relates to the extraction equipment, is requested to be updated in terms of timing to be within 4 months of commencement. This would not materially alter the condition, and the condition would still require the approved equipment to be installed prior to first use. Update for condition 14, which relates to opening hours, is to be updated to remove the sentence, when open to the public, the retractable roof canopy over the seating area at the front west of the building, hereby approved, shall not be open till 10 a.m. Or hours daily. That refers to this area encircled in purple, and this application does not have a retractable roof canopy over that area. It was mistakenly included in the condition. It should also be added that retractable roof canopy, which is not there, wouldn't have added any noise attenuation benefit to the scheme, so it doesn't alter the assessment of the noise impacts. Moving on to site photos. This is the site. These two are from photos from the front of the existing offer that is on site, which you can see is a bit ad hoc in appearance. Materials are varied, and it's been sort of cobbled together over the last, a few years ago following the damage from the fire. It's important to note that there you can see the side of one of the existing shipping containers and then the mixed sort of palette of materials that is currently visible. These are views from the rear of the site. You can see the bin store here, and looking through the side of the cafe building. And these two photos show the rear alleyway of the cafe, which is semi-open and very piecemeal in appearance. Looking at the approved and proposed plans. On the left is the approved plan of the extent permission, and on the right is the proposed. And you can see that they are almost identical in terms of footprint and site coverage. A very minor difference to note is that in this little area here, there is slightly more coverage due to an extended length of wheelchair ramp for access reasons. It's important to note that this in general confirms that this application does not include any commercial creep beyond what is already approved. Anything outside of this red line site is not being approved and is being dealt with either under other applications or enforcement investigations. Here are the approved and proposed elevations. The top two images are the front, which face out to the harbour, and you can see that they are almost identical. It's important to note that the advertising, the signage is being applied for under a separate application. And again, this is the approved and proposed of the main entrance elevation, which faces to the south. Here is where you can see that the main change is the removal of the solid roof to the open air frame, and some other minor alterations to the front entrance and the servery hatches for the takeaway and shop elements. Visually, the schemes are very similar and do not cause any concern in terms of character and appearance. These are the other approved and proposed elevations. This is the rear elevation, again, almost exactly the same, and the northern elevation, very similar in appearance, but where you can see the open canopy. The main issues that are involved in this application is the intensification of the commercial operation, including in terms of objections, too much takeaway use, and including additional waste that is generated. And also importantly, noise generation from the cafe and music events, particularly as a result of the removal of the roof over the main part of the cafe. Moving to the operation of the cafe, the proposed floor plan does not materially alter the approved operation of the site. It will still operate predominantly as a cafe with ancillary offer of takeaway and shop essentials. The numbers of covers available to sit in the cafe is still similar. The approved was around 92 and the proposed is around 96 for proper sit-down spaces. Previously, there were around 10 to 15 high seating spaces in the approved plan, but these would have been shared with takeaway customers. as you can see, the numbers there is no high seating in the proposed offer. The numbers are very similar and would not represent a material change in the cafe offer and demonstrate that this is still the dominant use of the development. Operation of the cafe with takeaway. The submitted proposal does not seek to offer more takeaway than was previously approved. It's simply removed it from the internal part of the cafe, which was previously noted as being around here, and moved it into the shop and takeaway area, which is within this purple area here. The approved shop area was previously 16 square metres, and the proposed shop, combined with takeaway, is 20 square metres. It removes that takeaway hatch element from within the cafe space, which will make both operations more simple to run and more functionally appropriate. And it will also be more logical for visitors to the site to understand how the space works. Operation of the cafe with takeaway. The proposed cafe development will improve the current condition of the site, which is subject to a temporary permission. The primary use of the proposal site is still for a cafe, use class EB, and this is defined in the description of the proposal, replacement cafe. The package of information submitted includes ancillary shop and takeaway. This means that any change from this use, including if the ancillary uses become more intensified, could be controlled through planning enforcement. Waste. This is controlled by condition 12, and it requires a detailed servicing management plan and commercial waste management plan. This is intended to be for the collection of waste generated by the business, and that would include waste generated by the takeaway offer. This is similar to the previous condition in the extant permission. Moving on to noise. The beach huts do provide overnight accommodation, but they are not primary residences and are not habitable in winter, November to February inclusive. This has to be balanced against the location as a tourist and visitor leisure destination. The assessment provided by the Council's Environmental Health Officer has confirmed that 3 complaints had been received over the previous 5 years from the existing operation. But within all of them, no noise nuisance was substantiated, and therefore the Environmental Health Officer recommended comprehensive conditions to control noise. Over the summer, there were typically 2 events per week, Saturdays with 3 hours of DJ music, Sunday with 3 hours of live singing. Thursday nights, on 3 occasions, there was live music within the cafe. The majority of these events were during the day when people are active and using all facilities around the sandbank, and it would not usually be considered an unacceptable or unsociable time to have music that is controlled. 3 scheduled events took place in the evening for the seafood night, and no complaints were received during these. It should be noted that since then, the request for the licensing, premises license review has been requested, and that's happening in November. After the consult from the Environmental Health Officer was received, there were 5 additional complaints generated from an informal event that happened at the cafe for a local's birthday party. It wasn't a scheduled event, but nonetheless 5 reports were made that night. It was in that case, no noise nuisance was substantiated following advice given to the operators, and it was deemed as sort of an isolated incident. Noise. Music is proposed, which forms the objection alongside noise from customers, especially during these events. A detailed noise management plan is required by way of condition 6. The details required are frequency of events. Currently suggested are 2 times per week in the summer and 1 per week in the winter. The times of these would be restricted from 10 a.m. till 9 for no longer than 3 hours with a 15 to 30-minute break. There would have to be notification of the events publicly or directly to part owners. Details of the sound system would need to be submitted for approval, and that would include a noise limiter. Details of how the noise from customers will be controlled, especially rowdy behaviour. There would be a documented complaints procedure, provide beach hut users with a contact number for any concerns during events. Detail how noise from customers will be controlled. Details of monitoring carried out during events with amplified music to ensure it is not too loud, and records kept of monitoring throughout events so corrective action can be taken if necessary. The approved noise management plan would have to be implemented in full prior to commencement of use and adhered to at all times thereafter. So, subject to satisfactory details being approved, the noise management plan would be sufficient to control noise in this location. In conclusion, the use of the site as a cafe with an ancillary shop and takeaway are acceptable. No expansion or intensification is proposed beyond the extent permission. Design, scale and materials are suitable to the beachfront location. Noise arising from music events and customers would be controlled by a suitably worded condition that is enforceable. The proposed development would not materially harm the openness of the Greenbelt or the SSI or the SNCI. It would be acceptable in terms of traffic safety, biodiversity enhancement and net gain, and subject to satisfactory servicing management plan and commercial waste management plan. The waste will be managed appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. James, for the presentation. So we'll now go to speakers. So, Sonia.
Thank you. So there are two people speaking in objection. The first is Darren Pidwell, Chair of Mudderford Sandbank Beach Hut Association, and followed by Claire Bath, who's the Deputy Chair. Darren is joining us on Teams.
So, Mrs. Bath, if you wanted to take a seat, set the microphone ready. So, Mr. Pidwell, when you're ready.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and fellow councillors. Claire Bath and I welcome the opportunity to submit to you our brief statement this morning. We represent the over 300 residential beach owners on the sandbank. Whilst we've previously expressed our general support for the design, our caveat was always in relation to an appropriate noise and operational management plan to ensure that residents are not unduly impacted because of the cafe's proposed open air structure and live music events. The plan presented to you today is a major change from the extant permissions by virtue of that open design, and as a result, the ongoing impact on the local community from both noise and operating model. The amendments we have suggested were sent to you by email last weekend. Since the fire in 2018, what was a family-friendly dining venue with occasional live music events in an enclosed environment has morphed into a beach bar, food takeaway and music festival site, festival being the term used by the tenant in their social media posts, which has created unprecedented visitor numbers, considerable noise invasion and severe strain on local facilities, as well as being in breach of the Mudderford Sandbank Management Plan. If you could flick up the first image, please. This shows the cafe pre-fire. I appreciate you've already seen some visuals, but the second image shows how the operation has been allowed to extensively spill out into the surrounding area. Now, our fear is that this style of operation will continue, albeit a new building, unless very specific conditions apply. This is the key point we would ask the committee to consider today. Let me now address the points made by your officer about noise. There have been a few formal complaints made, but the key reason for the low numbers was that since 2019, we've been assured by the tenant and BCP officers that the new build would happen every winter since then, that this new build would be an enclosed site with a roof and doors, along ultimately with their desire to return the cafe to its enclosed, family-friendly, table service dining venue. Our members then just accepted what was happening on the basis that the problem would fall away when the cafe was rebuilt. Unfortunately, due to the lack of funds available to BCP, this has not happened. Hence, this revised, cheaper, open-air design that is before you today. I would also like to quote from the tenant's proposed operating plan for the site, which was part of their original presentation to our members. Its headline mission statement was to leave only footprints and the only sound is that of the waves breaking. A wonderful objective. I think the question today is how can we achieve this through appropriate planning conditions? Now I'd like to hand over to Claire. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and members. The current temporary planning has enabled a major shift to an open-air, live music, festival-style beach bar with multiple breaches of planning law under investigation. 5 planning applications since 2019 have frustrated the reinstatement of a contained cafe with a roof to the detriment of the area and residential amenities. This proposal for an open-air building with an enormous open entrance is a significant change from the extant permission. Without strong conditions, it will perpetuate the current operation. Mudderford Sandbank is unlike the commercial seafront of Bournemouth. It has multiple environmental protection policies, as shown in 29 of your paper. Your own management plan of 2014 states, whilst the popularity of the sandbank could be increased, visitor levels should be kept at present levels to maintain sustainability. Too many examples of fragile sites have been destroyed through sheer pressure of numbers and poor visitor management, and it is hoped that this management plan will work to assure the sandbank's unique environment is preserved. Many huts with children sleeping are less than 4 metres from the cafe. The noise impact from music will be significant. Our conditions are to restore harmony between the proposed open-air commercial operation and this delicate protected environment, to restrict live music to once a week and finishing by 7 p.m, to limit ancillary takeaway sales to the external hatches only, and to return the internal cafe to a sit-down restaurant with no takeaway sales. The operating hours, vehicle deliveries and refuge conditions to align with the residential nature of this location. Please consider how you would feel if the live music open-air beach bar was located 4 metres from your home, and condition this application to return the beach house to its previous operating model. Thank you.
Thank you. The next
Thank you.
speakers.
Yes, speaking in support, we have Claire Spiller on behalf of the applicant, followed by Richard Slater, the applicant.
Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. You will also hear from the applicants. The main changes between this proposal and the extant permission are reusing the existing shipping containers already on site in use into this new building design, an open-air roof over the cafe area with temporary waterproof covers for use in the winter months, and minor alterations to the layout and design of the entrance, and alterations to the internal layout, but it will be retaining the seating covers for the cafe. This proposal continues to follow the rhythm of the adjacent beach huts, with the more open roof form structure still being read as a series of linked gables. Some of the objections relate to noise. The current cafe is mainly open to the elements and has been operating events with live amplified music, twice a week from April to September and once a week from October to March. Your Environmental Health Officer confirms in page 103 of your committee report that the site's operated with 2 amplified music events per week for the last 2 years without any substantive complaints. They advise that providing sufficient measures are implemented and followed to control noise, the impact to the surrounding sensitive receptors should be minimal. They advise a suitably worded condition should be imposed to secure a noise management plan detailing the mitigation measures proposed to control the music noise from the site. this proposed noise management plan condition number 6 is acceptable to the applicant. The proposal will comply with policy CS29, tourism and cultural facilities, and with the aims of policy CS6, delivering sustainable communities, and meet your key council objective in your corporate seafront strategy, securing a future for the Beach House Cafe site. I will now hand you over to the applicant.
Hi everyone. This is not the first application for this site, as we've heard, but rather the latest in an ongoing process since the fire in 2018 engulfed the building. In brief, there have been 3 previous sets of plans. The first, submitted by the council, were not well received and withdrawn. The second, a like-for-like rebuild, was a part of due process, but ultimately could not be afforded by the council and presented a wasted opportunity to create something special. And thirdly, our own previous submission that was developed alongside the Hutty Association and approved. We hope to have it built by now, but unfortunately council finances did not allow for this. So this is hopefully our final submission. Based on the already approved design, it allows for a staged development process that gets us towards the approved design, but in a way that allows us as the business to take on the cost of the redevelopment in lieu of the council being unable to fulfil its responsibilities. Again, we worked with the Hutty Association through this process and engaged their members in an open evening from which no negative feedback was given to us afterwards. We understand that the association needs to represent the concerns of any of its members, but their concerns are by no means shared by all hut owners, with many having personally expressed their support. I believe everyone here has agreed that it has been too long since the fire without progress, despite everyone's efforts. The objectors are not just residents of the beach huts to us, but also regular customers, old friends of the business. They all have fond memories of dining there in the past. Their children have worked for us and their families have grown up there over the years. This application represents the single best opportunity for the premises to be reinstated in a fashion better suited to the area, better able to serve all the people that enjoy spending time at Hengistbury Head and continue to be at the heart of the community. The current temporary setup was meant to be a short-term solution. It is long past time for a long-term solution to take place. The council officers have raised no objection to the plans presented. We acknowledge the concerns of some of the hut owners, but we're confident that as a long-standing and popular business, we can allay the concerns of those present once we reopen with the noise management plan and the waste management plan in place and get back to business in the way previously enjoyed by themselves and the other visitors of Hengistbury Head, all of which form the community of this unique place. There are no other options on the table at this point, thanks to the council funding issues, and it would be a shame to waste this opportunity to rebuild as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slater.
Thank you. And we also have 2 ward councillors, Councillor Bernadette Nonovo and Councillor Judy Richardson.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Bernadette Nonovo, one of the ward councillors for this area. This application has raised a lot of interest, but there is one thing that most people agree on. A cafe is needed on this site, and there has been a cafe restaurant here for many years. The new structure is a great improvement on what is currently in place. The cafe is important for locals, the beach hut owners, and for the wider tourist trade. The issues raised have been mostly about noise and events and the over-commercialisation of this site, and I would hope that these will be dealt with by the appropriate bodies, licensing, environmental health. The other issue raised has been waste and litter, and that is a big concern, as it is very time-consuming for us all trying to keep on top of litter picking and protect our coastline and wildlife. I would hope that the applicant will do everything possible to get customers to recycle and dispose of the takeaway packaging. Personally, I would prefer less takeaways, but the reason these businesses are so successful is because they give the customers what they want. and unless a business is successful, it will not survive. So I understand the importance of balancing the concerns of locals, the environment, and the need to generate income. I'm encouraged to see that the lighting is to be controlled by a condition and that there will be new toilet facilities. Always a plus in my book. And there will be a noise management plan. I'm sure that the committee will agree that it's important to enforce the conditions outlined in the officer's report and that they will scrutinise this application to ensure that everything is done to mitigate any damage to the local area, which is very ecologically sensitive. Thank you.
Good morning. As a ward councillor, I am speaking in support of resident concerns raised in relation to the development of the Beach House Cafe on Mudderford Sandbank. As you are aware, these concerns relate to the potential negative impact created by an increasingly diverse hospitality offer and live music event operation in an open venue. This will create disturbance to both the environmental site, which is subject to the Sandbank Management Plan and other protective policies. Similarly affected will be both the daytime and overnight accommodation enjoyed by beach hut residents. I would ask, therefore, that, in consideration of this application, suitable and sufficient planning conditions be imposed to mitigate these environmental and residential concerns. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Miss James, was there anything that you heard from the speakers that you wanted to come back on?
No, I think.
Just a mic.
Sorry. Nothing overly worried. Like, I agree that this application does. It already has a precedent there, and the right way to control it is via appropriately worded conditions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So I'll open up to members for questions. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's there's the seating area is outside of this application and isn't material to our consideration, but the waste management plan is, and I think it want to check that the waste management plan, or we could make sure that the waste management plan doesn't just include the red line area, that it includes a situation. Now, I have been a regular user of the cafe. It's a fantastic. I'm not going to say any more of that, so I have a question. It's the dustbins externally for use, and make sure that when somebody goes and buys a hot chocolate or something, they walk over the head, or they paddle, kayak, however they get there, that it's not uncommon to go get a hot chocolate, cup of coffee, takeaway, and then you walk away from the cafe, and it's that element of the waste management plan that I think is key to me as a user, to make sure, can we make that a condition that there's, or is it in there that there's a certain
James.
I would, the waste management condition as it is worded is more about the commercial operation and the collection of, and I actually do believe that there is scope for an additional either some wording added to that condition or an additional condition for a scheme of bins around the site. They would have to be within the red line and relevant to this application and proportional, but that is an option open to the committee. Yeah.
The only point I'd make is that there's many fast food establishments that have a condition, or they take on local collections of waste. And I know at very peak seasons, the bins provided by the council can be overwhelmed, and we've seen on many locations I see front at very, very peak times. And I appreciate it is quite onerous, but I wouldn't want to see a condition that, ask them to set bins miles away from the site, but a bin within sort of 10 metres either direction of the main thoroughfare, because people walk, sit down, get up, walk, and there are some lazy people out there that don't want to walk back to to the establishment to put it in a bin out directly outside, but within eyesight of the establishment to have at least a bin either side would be, I think, I don't want to. I'm happy to delegate this to the head of planning to agree this, but as a condition. But that's my main concern over the waste management here is the, as one of the councillors, ward councillors stated about the waste impact, and if there's staff available, well, there should be staff available, that it's put on a regular thing, that there is a beach house bin either side at least, and maybe one behind on the walk through, so people tend to walk over to the beach side from there or along.
Okay.
I think trainers.
Yeah, and obviously we're aware of Summerford in Barrett Road and Summerford Road, where the McDonald's do a walk up quite a few 100 metres each side of their building. So it's that type of thing could be encompassed with the plan. Okay.
Can I just respond? That was something that was discussed at the applicant do litter picking at the moment, and so it would be reasonable to get that included in a written condition.
Councillor Salmon.
So it was just on condition 6 around the noise management plan. So it says that this list isn't exhaustive, and it also has that the frequency of events is suggested rather than nailed in. Can we tighten that condition to make sure that the current suggested values in there are the kind of upper limit of how noisy it would be, and when it comes to actually what's in place, it is as strict, if not stricter, than what's already in here? I thought suggested left wriggle room that maybe we didn't want.
Ms. James?
Yeah, the wording of the condition could remove suggested, but it needs to be noted that the noise management plan has to be submitted for approval. So, and that would be based on all of the information that's required in that, and it would be assessed against that information. But yes, the word suggested could be taken out. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Karen?
And the other area that I was interested in was the flood risk, because I might be wrong, but as far as I understand, there isn't an evacuation plan. Now, I'm not quite sure if I've understood what is meant by an evacuation plan, if that's the evacuation of the building or the evacuation of the area, and I just wanted some clarity on what's missing.
So it's not a planning requirement for that. It's a requirement. Might get Simon to step in here. It's a bit more technical, but the evacuation plan would be for the building and the operation, and that would need to comply with the directives of the Environment Agency.
So if there were concerns about the amount of traffic that this would bring into the area and the difficulty that would present if there was a flooding event and people had to vacate rapidly, and the pressure that would put on the highways network and so forth, that wouldn't be a valid planning concern for refusal. The only reason we would refuse on concerns over the flood management risk would be if we felt that the building really needed an evacuation plan for the building, and that the lack of one was a massive problem, which I think, looking at the building, looking at the site, I think it's easy enough to get out of there. I can see why we've not got an evacuation plan there. So I think I've answered that then. I think I've got my head around that. That's not a valid reason for refusal.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Salmon. Councillor Slade.
Do we know what the operating hours were this summer? You put your report here suggests open until 11. Do we know what they were this year? Was one for the applicant, possibly?
I don't know what the ones off the top of my head were this year. I know sorry. I don't know exactly what the ones were during the operation this year. 11 p.m. I think is right, but maybe I'll get the applicant to confirm.
If the committee's happy, Mr. Slater. Just this point, thank you.
So the operation of the open air site at present is quite restricted by the ferry access, and where the ferry has been stopping running at 8 or 9 p.m, we've been stopping running as a business shortly afterwards. Licensing, however, does allow us until midnight.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Slade? And just on that point, the hours in the document, are they the same as proposed in the extant permission?
Yes, they are.
So if there's no further questions.
No.
Oh, sorry, Miss Councillor Gillett.
It's just a question on the perimeter dune grasses. You put a condition on there saying that, well, you sort of call it Grampian style planning conditions, which would mean that, I guess that would mean that they would have to plant them before they were able to build the rest of the building. But I was wondering, with dune marron grasses, they you know, people walk over them, they tend to kind of die off a bit. So just planting them probably wouldn't be sufficient. I was just wondering, would we be able to add a condition to say that it had to be maintained as well as just planted at the beginning? It's probably more important than just having something in the first instance there.
Landscaping, one thing.
Yeah. An additional line could be, or a few lines could be added to a condition to require maintenance. Usually those kind of conditions are for 5 years after the first planting, for anything to be replaced if it was to die off or become damaged. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Calverwell?
Yeah, it's just Councillor Talon's point about taking out that suggested and making that an upper limit, I think, goes some way to meet concerns that were expressed earlier on. But I'm wondering what we can do further in terms of the conditions to limit the takeaway offer, which is part of the representations that the beach owners made.
And to be more specific, as a question for the officer, what do you?
Well, I think the representations from the beach owners were indicating that there should be some restriction on the amount of takeaway service that's there.
So it's the plan submitted designate an area for takeaways, and that is something that we can control through a planning assessment. But you can't control the amount of visitors that are going to attend an area and require a service. So it would be difficult to find a condition wording that could restrict the number of people visiting a cafe which is open to the public. Is that?
No, I thought the question that was being made by the beach owners was about how you control the extent to which this operation runs a takeaway service. Because I think the implication of what they were suggesting was a preference to go back to a table service.
The issue is that we have an extant permission that has approved an ancillary element of takeaway provision at the site, and so that is, the position that we are in terms of assessment. It would be unreasonable, in my view, to take that away within this application when it is already approved. It's live. It could be built now. It could be implemented now. And so it is controlled in terms of the area within the footprint of the building, but it wouldn't be, in my view, possible to control the amount of visitors and that would require a takeaway service there. It is possible to require that the number of covers in the cafe remains the same or similar. And that is currently proposed at 96, where the previous approval was 92. So I don't feel that in this application there is, you know, a material difference between what was approved and what is proposed. Does that?
Mr. James, just on that point, there was some confusion about the use class for the building. So it's basically for a restaurant, and previously the application is the takeaway and the restaurant is in the internal. Now the takeaway is at the edge. Does that change the use class at all?
No, the use class is still a cafe restaurant use class. That is the overriding use class, and there is and that is in the description of the proposal, which is a binding element of the application. There is no part of the description that says takeaway or shop. It is within the package of documents.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So if there's no further questions, we go into debate then, please. So, Councillor Slade.
Thank you. The one that gets me is the hours of operation. I get the officer's report says 11 o'clock, open until 11 o'clock. And I see the residents want it at 10 for the cafe and 9 for the hatch, 7 for the hatch. Closing at 11, people drinking, partying, having a great time, are then leaving there, walking down the spit, passing all the families, all the kids. There is going to be noise and all sorts. It would bug me if I was renting one of the huts or living in one of the huts over the summer period with the kids and people are waking the kids up. One of my neighbours either side of me have parties in the summer. It does bug me that you've got noise and there's kids, and they are predominantly family huts down there and family staying. So I do have a concern around 11 o'clock. I would like to see some sort of limit on that. Not significantly, the residents are requesting 10 o'clock. Closing at 10, kicking out at 10, 10:30, quarter to 11, people are leaving and wandering down there, seems more reasonable than kicking them out at 11 o'clock, hanging around, loud noise, partying, whatever, and wandering down there. Not so they are going to be partying, but reducing those hours slightly, I would like to see it limited to, I don't know, opening until 10 o'clock. I've got no issue on the hatch closing at 7 o'clock, but I would like to see some condition where it must be closed by 10 o'clock, and they're there in my comments.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further debate? Councillor Tarling?
Yeah, I've been staying in beach huts there for a few years. Friends that have got beach huts I've stayed in a number of different locations. I've been to parties down there as a young man, and now as an older man with kids, and I've seen the ambiance change quite a bit. And there are some huts which are quiet, and so I've got friends that got beach huts that are quiet, and there's some that are closer and a bit more noisy. And you do go past some of these beach huts and you see them, with their widescreen TVs, sound systems, covered in solar panels, and they are in themselves absolute party venues. So there is a mixture of views, and I'll be honest, I haven't spoken, none of the people I know that own beach huts have spoken to me about this application. I've had conversations in the past about it. I take on board exactly what the Beach Huts Owners Associations is saying, and it's true, they don't represent every view of the beach hut, but as a committee they have formed and democratically had their view of as an owners association. But there's a lot of users down there, and they are one subset of the people that use Hengistbury Head and the spit there for recreation. The vast proportion of people either park at Mudderford Quay, come over on the ferry, or they walk down, or they take what we used to call the Noddy train, land train, down to Beach Hut, and it is a massive tourist attraction for the area. It has been underserved by the temporary cafe that we've had over the last few years. I like the aesthetic. I know there's no real change to it, but one of the previous applications had a much larger roof. Regarding the noise, there's two issues here for me. It's the noise and it's the waste. I think if we can strengthen up the waste management plan, as I mentioned about the as Councillor Hilliard said, either a picking regime, especially in peak periods, and the provision of at least 2 additional bins within eyesight of the facility. I'm not asking to do the whole site, and that they manage those sufficiently would do that. Regarding the noise and the noise management plan, and I think noise is a very technical thing, and statutory nuisance under Section 60 of the Controlled Pollution Act, which is the statutory nuisance thing that EHOs use, is very difficult. It's very subjective, and you can't put a sound meter against nuisance. There isn't a decibel that goes, that's annoying, because if you hear somebody using offensive language, even if it's whispered, it can be quite offensive. And if people are having a raucous time, nobody objects to the party they're invited to, and that's part of the issue here. Is that if you're sitting there and you're enjoying your nice glass of Chablis on your beach hut, listening to people having a raucous time next door, and you want a quiet time, then I appreciate there's that nuisance value is very difficult to ascertain. But there's been a facility there for a long time. There's been party there for a long time. I've stayed on beach huts when I've tried to be quiet, and there's been a party going on the beach hut next door, and they've got their Bluetooth speaker thumping out, and it does happen. So I think noise management plan is actually very good, and I'm happy to support this application on the basis that we just firm up the waste management plan. The noise management plan is very technical when it comes to acoustics, and I think there's a lot in there, but I'm happy that we delegate that to the head of planning to firm up that condition and make sure it's there. Regarding Councillor Gillett's BNG comments, I'm actually pleased to see there is some, and marrow grass is the toughest grass going, so if that's what the planting plan is, but I would agree with him that any landscape condition needs to have a maintenance period with it, and be that the green roof or the peripheral planting. I think its location it's possibly very difficult to prove BNG in this area, but they've done it by planting some grasses, so happy to see it happen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Salmon.
So I hear Councillor Slade's points on the noise and on the opening hours, and I can see the value in maybe being more restrictive with when the place closes. But then I was thinking, actually, that's almost a licensing issue. And if they're spilling out at 11 p.m. and waking my kids up in my beach hut, I'm just as annoyed as if they were doing that at 10 p.m. or 2 a.m. probably, maybe a bit more annoyed at 2 a.m. But I think that's is the premises handling the patrons properly or not? And it almost doesn't matter how long they're able to open. If people are drinking in an antisocial fashion, leaving in an antisocial manner, that's what they're doing. And that's, I'm not sure we can fix that with the opening hours. I'm not sure that's a useful lever to pull. I'd be more tempted to, as Councillor Tarling suggested, tighten up the waste management plan. I like the idea of, like the McDonald's do, the litter picking, going up and down. And I think as long as that is included in the waste management plan, and we are insistent that the noise management plan is the upper limit of what could be done, I think aside from that, the antisocial behaviour, I think if that does exist, I'm not definite that closing at 10 rather than 11 would sort that out. And it's hard to run a business in this country. It is hard to run a business in this country. And I wouldn't like to see somewhere fail because the offering they're putting on, because they can't stay open till 11 because of the condition we've put on, I'd much rather see that actually if they want to do a big festival thing, that's a 10 application and all of that, maybe that can extend it. I still think we should be as light touch as possible. I'm tempted to propose that we approve this subject to the additional tightening up of the waste management plan, as Councillor Tarling suggested, and the upper limit on the noise management plan. I think I go with that. I'm reluctant to restrict the opening hours. If everybody else on this committee felt differently, I haven't been out for ages. Maybe actually that extra hour of drinking from 10 to 11 is when it all goes wrong. I'm in bed by then anyway these days. Yeah, but that would be my proposal, that we approve with those two tightenings.
Okay, thanks for that proposal. And just to clear up, so with the noise management plan condition as it is, I think it was 6, and are you leaving it for the officer to agree, or are there any specific wording you wanted to add in?
I simply wanted in 6, where it says that these things are suggested, I didn't want the actual noise management plan that comes back to go any looser than what's in there. So I think it says music has to stop by 10 p.m. I wouldn't want to see the actual noise management plan come back finishing at 11. I'd have no problems if it goes, oh, actually it finishes at 9. I just want to be clear that what's currently set out as suggestions are the upper bounds of what could be done, not the lower bounds, if that makes sense.
Okay. And do I have a seconder for that, Councillor Tarling?
Yeah, happy to second that, and I agree with Councillor Salmon's comments about the upper limits on the noise management plan. As long as and happy that we delegate that to the head of planning to approve that in line with Councillor Salmon's comments.
Thank you. Any further comments? Mr. Gould, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just try and pull things together before members go to the vote. So, listening to the debate, we'll start with condition 6, which Councillor Salmon's just been talking about. Am I right in thinking that members want to remove where you've got the word suggested in brackets, because that's too loose? And I could maybe suggest that you might substitute that word for a maximum of 2
that's great.
per week. And then the line below that, which deals with opening hours, the time of events, I think you could probably remove the words "we would recommend" and substitute that with the time of events with amplified music is restricted between 10 and 9 p.m.
I think that's...
Yeah. Is that what members are driving
Councillor
at?
Tarling?
Yeah, I went to a wedding reception. I think it's the first wedding reception there, and I wouldn't want to. I think that there's other provisions in there for notification of events to local residents. So there may be some weeks when they want to do 3 or 4 events, and there's other weeks when they don't want any at all. And I wouldn't necessarily want to restrict, you know, the opportunity. If somebody said, "Oh, I want to do a wedding on a Thursday night," and it's only going to go on until 10 o'clock, that there there's a private party there to say, well, actually, we've only had 3 events. We're up to our maximum this time. I think that comes into licensing.
And I think, as you said, there's different mechanisms for the temporary event notices. Would you, I think, but restricting it to 2, there's other mechanisms if they want to do more.
Condition 6 talks about the time of the events to be restricted between 10 a.m. and 9 p.m. Obviously, if approved, the condition says what it says. So,
Councillor Salmon?
It might be my ignorance about the process, but am I right in theory that even with that condition, say next year there was an overwhelming desire to have 3 events with one big, you know, extra third special event that goes on with live music until 11, the applicant could put in for a temporary event notice to have something like that happen. So much as this would be fairly restrictive on the business as usual, in exceptional circumstances, we could go above and beyond, and that would go for all of the proper checks and balances that we would expect, and the system would work as planned.
That's it.
yeah. If members were to approve the application with the wording in the condition as currently stated, then, as I say, the condition says what it says. It will be, with the suggested changes, a maximum of 2 per week. Obviously, the applicant would be entitled to apply for a variation of that planning condition, which would be a separate application, a separate consideration, for people to comment on, might even end up here at committee. If the business needs change and they decide that they want to operate 3 or 4 events. But as worded, and if approved, it would say that it would be subject to a maximum of 2 events per week. And if they were operating it at 3 or 4, then it could be subject to enforcement action.
But to Councillor Summers' point, so would the licensing be another mechanism outside of the planning? So if we restricted it to 2, could they have a temporary events notice?
Well, I would hope that licensing would take on board what the planning permission states, because obviously you don't
So
really,
it's
it's not
limited,
ideal to create a conflict.
Right. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Rice.
And what's the difference between leaving it at suggested 2 per week and changing that to maximum? Does that actually change anything?
Well, I think if you wanted to go into a sort of more legal world, suggested is quite woolly, isn't it? It's like saying an average. It could be a few more, it could be a few less. So whereas obviously if you say maximum, it's very precise, isn't it? It's a maximum of 2.
Yeah, sorry to get caught up on this. Suggested 2 per week, April to September. It is very woolly, and it shouldn't be in a planning condition to say it's suggested, because it's way too woolly. And as Councillor Salmons pointed out, maximums are what we're looking at here. I think the fact that we'd say, if you were to say it's a suggested, and then in other brackets, the timing events, we would recommend that amplified music is restricted between 10 and 21 hours. So that's at events. That's not necessarily what the licensing will come back at. I'm slightly concerned that we don't either hamstring the license application by saying this is in planning or not. Now, I agree with Councillor Salmon about the noise thing, and I think 9 or 10 o'clock in the evening for the music going down, I think is probably right, or the stopping of live performance music, which tends to be a bit noisier. But that then, I think we just need to have that firmed out. And there's 2 things here that bug me. It's suggested, and then we would recommend. We have to firm those 2 up there, to be honest. And that's
it obviously is given flexibility. And Mr. James, did you have a slide where you said the events which happened this year? Because it is just given that flexibility for the business to react. So yeah, over summer, typically 2 events, and it has been Saturdays and Sundays, and then there was 3 Thursday night events. So it's normally it is 2, but occasionally. So as is the wording, although it is suggested and recommend, it just gives that flexibility. And I think again, the business said that they advertise the events, they make the owners association aware of the event coming, and obviously working with the council, I think there will be some obviously terms, and the times would be clear. So although we're saying the wording, and Mr. Gould, you said the wording, be nice to tone it down, the current wording does give that flexibility, and I imagine the wording is the same as in the extant position. Probably took it from the extant permission as well.
From the current assistant of the environmental health officer.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I appreciate your steer, but I think we're saying that the being specific might be restrictive.
No, I mean, it's entirely within the gift of the committee to run with whatever they want to in terms of the wording of the condition. And if they're more happy that leaving the word suggested in just provides that bit of flexibility for the business to respond to certain events happening, that again, that's within the gift of the committee. But Chair, just a couple of other points I just wanted to come back on. There was some talk about obviously the waste management, not in terms of commercial waste being collected, but in terms of waste that's being generated by patrons. There was obviously reference to the picnic benches down by the water's edge, and I think Mrs. James has confirmed that that's subject to a separate planning application at the moment. obviously, if that application was to be approved in due course, there could be conditions added to that. But equally, I do take councillor's point, and you could look at adding an additional condition relating to waste management generated by patrons as a separate condition. I would hope that a well-run business anyway would be clearing their tables, but to actually have a details submitted around maybe some small bins to be dotted around so that customers can put their finished cup of coffee in the bin when they finished, or as opposed to it blowing off and going into the water or something like that. So you could look at that. Regarding condition 17, Chair, that was a point raised by Councillor Gillett around the sandgrass. I was searching long and hard to find it, but I found it, and it's in the little a of condition 17. I think, is that right, Councillor? Where it talks about details of perimeter sandbank grasses to be submitted for agreement in writing. Members could look if they wanted to add something in there around the approved details to be implemented and retained and maintained thereafter, if they felt that that was a concern. And then finally, so just on the takeaway discussion that went on earlier, it's set out clearly in the application and Mrs. James' report that it's an ancillary element. Obviously, it's difficult, like Mrs. James said, to control the number of people that are going to visit it and want to buy something from it. But we're satisfied it remains an ancillary element. For example, look at the size of the floor area dedicated. I think there was talk of it being about 20 square metres. Obviously, the main cafe seated area is much bigger. So we're happy that it's an ancillary element. And yeah, thanks, Chair.
Thanks for clarifying that. Ms. James, did you want to come in?
Within condition 17, there is a line which says any plant found damaged, removed or dead or dying within the first 5 years following its planting shall be replaced with one of the same or similar species, etc. So it is covered in there.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Lepidovin.
Yeah, in relation to what Mr. Gould's just said, in the little a, if we just after planting put comma maintenance, and would that wording cover what the concerns are?
Proposer, you take those points on board. How would you want to see it?
So I just want to make sure I've got my head around exactly what those points were. So on condition 6, which is about the noise management plan, it might be my ignorance around licensing that's creeping in. I felt like much as what we would put here in a noise management plan would be the upper limits for the business as usual operation. There would be wiggle room for, say, a week in July for the business to go, oh, actually, July's really big. We want to do something that goes on until 11 p.m. We can, within the existing legal framework, put in an application to do that, and that could potentially be approved. But it sounds like, actually, if we put as a condition that there's a noise management plan, it says there's no music after 9 p.m, that would be set in stone. There would be no way for that business to operate a live music event with music going on beyond 9 p.m. I think in light of that, I would withdraw my proposal to tighten that. Can be quite happy to leave 6 as it is and be happy with the officers to come up with a solid noise management plan. I think that's somewhere where I'd be confident they will be across things. The waste management plan, so condition 12, which I think includes so subsection B, you've got service management plan incorporating commercial waste management plan, blah, 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 blah. I think that's where I felt Councillor Tarling's suggestion was to add something more to that would specify that waste management plan doesn't just cover the dotted area in red. It would mean if waste is, blows outside of the area of the cafe, they would be responsible for that, and they would also be responsible for, within a certain radius, just doing a little scan, somebody walking 10 minutes up the road with a litter picker and a bag, picking the stuff up. I felt that was something we could explicitly request within the waste management plan, and I think that sounds like it's something that is done by other businesses as part of the waste management plans there. I just wanted that explicitly within 12.
So as Mr. Gould said, it could be another condition specifically laying out that speak to the business and agree a
Oh yeah,
something
and
along
I'd
those lines.
be very happy to say delegate to the head of planning to come up with the wording, but I'd expect there to be an additional C that says waste management plan to include something that gives responsibility for the wider conurbation or whatever a technical legal term would be. I hope that makes sense. And I know I'm prevaricating. This feels very complicated, you know, but I do want us to get this right.
And then the last point on condition 17 about the grass, are you happy that it's already in there?
Yeah, I'm very happy with 17 is covered. I don't feel we need anything more.
And Councillor Tiling as seconder, you're happy with that?
Can I just make a point? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
I think we all. Sorry, just to make a point, and I think we're almost there. Apologies to everybody else that's listening. So Mr. Gould's made mention of an additional condition, a patron's waste management plan. Through you, Chair, I'm happy if to hear if the applicant is actually willing to do that. Would actually probably mollify any concerns that I have, and
he has been nodding throughout.
He has been nodding. Do we take a nod offline? That's fine. And for me, it would be a typically just two covered street bins, because we have seagulls as well. Being a bird lover, we don't want seagulls doing the waste management for us here. So just the typical sort of a pair of covered waste bins would be an indicative, but I'd leave this to the head of planning to put this into a condition, and certainly no more than 10 metres away, and that they would manage those bins. So when they're full, they would dispose of them in either with their commercial waste stream or through another thing. And I can't see that nodding, but
yeah.
Nobody's.
Okay, I think we're there with amendments. Mr. McQueen.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just so that I'm absolutely clear, because we're obviously the ones going away and tidying it up, as it were. So Councillor Salmon made the point about, so you've got two choices here on this waste management. You can either have a separate condition that deals with waste generated by patrons, or we could weave in a little C into condition 12 and put some wording in there. So I'll take guidance from members on what they would prefer, but either way, you know, they're both achievable.
Yeah, I think just add it
to 12. Yeah, okay, thank you, Chair. And then finally, Chair, obviously just the housekeeping part about, as before members go to the vote, to remind them to give delegated powers back to the head of planning operations to obviously make the amendments to that condition. We're not changing condition 6, as I now understand it. We're not changing condition 17 relating to the sandgrass. So it would just be delegated power back to the head of planning operations to amend condition 12 to add that additional wording in respect of waste generated by patrons. And then finally, obviously, just to remind members also that there will be, if they vote to approve, obviously the addendum sheet forms part of that package as well.
Okay, agreed. And Councillor Campbell.
I'm still unhappy about 6. I'm still unhappy about 6, because worded as it is, I just don't know how we enforce it. Because if it drifts from 2 per week to 3 or 4 per week, how do you enforce it? The truth is you can't. So I'm concerned that we've drifted, away from setting it as a maximum to making it more flexible, because more flexible means you can't enforce it.
Well, I think as we've seen from the slide, the slide at the moment saying how many events of, yes, I know you can't say that was this year, you don't know what's going to happen next year or whatever, but I think the business is a family business. They've been trying to work with the Hut Association. They know the Hut Association is crucial to their business. So I think you've got to put something in the hands of a business, but also the BCP environmental health team would be all over it if it got out of control and too many events or events. So, Salmon?
I think just to make sure I've understood, even if we are not prescriptive in what we're saying the noise management plan should be in 6, there is no reason that the noise management plan couldn't cover exactly these things. It's more, if as a planning condition, we write the noise management plan here and now, there's no flexibility on that noise management plan. Whereas if we leave it as written now, in a year's time, that noise management plan could be reviewed and could be changed. But if we decide what it is here and now as committee, it's set in stone. And I want us to avoid doing that. I don't like documents written by committee if we can avoid it.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. So, Ms Hollywood, are you happy with the wordings captured?
I am. So it's to grant permission in accordance with the recommendation in the officer's report as updated by the addendum and subject to power being delegated to the head of planning and operations to determine the final wording of an amended condition, the waste management plan condition, to include a waste management plan in respect of patrons.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we'll clear that and take your point, Councillor Canavan. So if you are in favour for this application to be approved, show now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And if you're against the application, show now. And if you are abstaining,
2.
so the result is that application has been approved. Thank you. We'll just take a 5-minute break before 6B. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. And item 6B is 32 Southbourne Grove. And it's Mr. Sanders, please.
Good morning. This application's for 32 Southbourne Grove. It is a retrospective application for a single-storey rear store extension and modification to shopfront. The key issues of this application are the impact on the design and character of the area, including impacts on the Southbourne Grove Conservation Area, the impacts on amenity, and this is of users who have a disability or issues with mobility, and general neighbouring residential amenity, impacts on drainage, and impacts on B&G. So just a brief introduction to the site. This is the submitted web plans with the application. You can see it is a restaurant unit onto Southbourne Grove. This shows just a bit clearer the location, the star showing the unit. To the right of the unit, we have a shop, and to the left is an alleyway with Tesco Express the other side. If you look at the image to the right there, you can see the green hatching. That green hatching is the Southbourne Grove Conservation Area, and it runs along the side of the boundary, effectively the left-hand wall as you look at it there. Here are the original plans and elevations. I do have accompanying pictures. It's quite challenging to kind of see what's there before and after. We do not have any imagery that was taken on site of what was there previously because the works were already underway by the time the first site visit was conducted. However, using Google Street View from July 2018, this is the best example we have of what the shop looked like. This being the unit bacon and cheese. So here are the plans as built. Again, I have some photos to accompany this, but what you can see there is the timber store up here, and then the front of the shop works down here. So here are the photos of the front of the unit. I have a Google Street View image taken from May this year. I've also got 2 photos on site up here. And then this photo down here is for a previous application for a ventilation extraction system, and that was taken back in January of this year. So as you can see, by that site visit, most of the works had actually taken place in terms of the front elevations. Here are the photos of the rear. Photo on the left, taken when I attended site in January, and the photo on the right of the finished rear store. Just to be clear, this application is for kind of 2 elements, the front of the shop and this rear store. And we do not see the rear store element as causing unacceptable harm, and this is reflected in the planning report. So, just for a comparison for ease, I've displayed what was previously present and what is there now. Please note the change to the design of the shop front, the darkened glass, the proportion of the doorway in the glass specifically on the right. And also note the tapering of the double doorway to a single recessed doorway, the removal of the step-free access ramp which previously existed, and the new single steps you see. On the left here, it's step-free access, and then on the right here, a step. So the recommendation, this is for a refusal, not compliant with policies CS9 and CS41 of the Core Strategy 2012, provisions of the Shopfronts Guide, and Section 12 and other relevant provisions of the MPPF 2024. This is for poor design. It's got a disproportionate front elevation. It has a non-permeable shop front through the choice of glass and design. There's a removal of the open feel which is present throughout the parade of shops. Southbourne Grovers is a very busy road in terms of that respect. And creation of a dead frontage with a removal of vitality. It is also harmful to the amenity of users who have disability or issues of mobility. There is removal of a step-free access, which is a retrograde step which prevents users with a disability from accessing the restaurant. And recessing the door and changing it from a double to a single width creates a challenging entry for disabled users. Now, as part of the planning assessment, we do take into account public sector equality duty, and this was considered as per guidance. This means protected characteristics under the Equality Act 2010 have been taken into account within the decision-making process, and this is also outlined within the planning report. and there are no issues regarding neighbouring amenity, and the applicant has provided sufficient drainage information, and there is no issues regarding B&G. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders, for the reports. So, Ms. Hollyoak for speakers.
Thank you. We have a statement of objection from Ben Smith, which I'm going to read out on his behalf. Regrettably, I am unable to attend in person due to work commitments. Firstly, the application contains an inaccurate claim that a step has always existed. A simple Google Maps search reveals that this was previously step-free, as confirmed by numerous local residents as well. It is imperative that the committee acknowledge this inaccuracy and the reduction in door size following the installation of the step. As a wheelchair user, I am deeply disappointed that many businesses fail to make any reasonable adjustments. However, I have never witnessed a business permanently remove access as seen here. Installing a window sticker and a removable non-compliant ramp on demand does not equate to equal permanent step-free access as previously provided. This likely constitutes a breach of the Equality Act 2010 and should never have been implemented without thorough scrutiny. We must reflect on the kind of town we aspire to be. Are we a modern, forward-thinking tourist destination striving to build a reputation as an inclusive, vibrant and sustainable community? Alternatively, are we an unwelcoming location that contradicts our own values and alienates potential visitors? While we are making progress in accessibility at Folkestone train station, it is crucial to focus on the unwelcoming businesses that visitors may encounter. I sincerely hope that this committee will reject the proposal and insist on the restoration of accessibility rather than settling for a compromise. It is evident by disability law that such an action should never be taken, but a clear precedent to support disabled residents and visitors is at stake. Speaking on behalf of the applicant, we have Mr. Neil Bishard.
Good morning. My name is Neil Bishard and I'm the architect and agent for the retrospective application. The property forms part of the extended Southbourne Grove frontage, and along with its immediate neighbour is actually one of the few remaining single-storey buildings in the Parade. Until recently, it was a tired and anonymous unit that made little contribution to the street scene. The completed works have given the building a clearer identity and a sense of energy. Southbourne Grove has an eclectic mix of shop fronts, especially with the nearby conservation area, featuring a variety of colours, styles and materials. In that context, this scheme adds visual interest while sitting comfortably within its surroundings. The black itself does feature in other units, including a new bakery close by. Importantly, the restaurant has quickly established itself as a very popular destination in the few months since opening, and attracting a steady stream of customers and contributing to the vitality of the local economy. On accessibility, whilst there is a small step at the entrance, the applicant provides a portable ramp that can be deployed as needed. This ensures wheelchair access without obstructing the public pavement, which lies outside the applicant's ownership and control. It's a practical solution reflecting a commitment to inclusivity within reasonable limits. A further suggestion is the actual entrance element could be modified if that was the remaining stumbling block. This project is the initiative of a small local business investing in both its future and the character of Southbourne Grove. At a time when we see the high street is increasingly dominated by larger corporate operators, it's encouraging to see an independent trader contributing to the area's individuality and appeal. The redesigned frontage is sleek, modern and elegant, bringing the unit up to date without clashing with neighbouring properties. It's not the only black glazed shopfront in the vicinity, and local feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. One resident has remarked that if more small businesses had the vision to present themselves this well, our high streets would be thriving. In summary, this modest scheme enhances the street visually, makes a reasonable provision for accessibility, and supports the independent spirit that defines Southbourne Grove. I respectfully ask members to support this retrospective application. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Bishard.
And we also have Councillor George Farquhar, who's called in the application.
Thank you, Chair, and committee for giving me the opportunity to speak today. It's always a difficulty with a retrospective application to provide, as we found from the recommendations for the officer, for the needs. Having lived in Southbourne since 2011, I can confirm that the frontage and the actual bacon and cheese that was there already was a very popular location, particularly with my dog, because it would always come out and give him a small piece of ham or a bit of cheese when we were passing. And I used to use it myself for Christmas shopping. It wasn't a tired location. It was a location which was actually a landmark. People used to navigate by the street, by the bacon and cheese. What prompted my call in is because it is retrospective and we didn't have at the time enough representations to bring it to committee for consideration and have the voice of the disability or the residents which have a disability, such as Mr. Ben Smith, who issued his statement that have been in touch with me as regards this impact. Just talking about the impact, just in the papers itself, I'll draw your attention to paragraph 5 of the committee, where it said that this frontage was installed and operational by May 2025, according to Street View. But the opening night was, in fact, the 28th of February of this year. So people that have disabilities have been impacted from using this facility since the 28th of February. And they continue to be impacted. There was mentioned by the applicant representative that a temporary ramp was available. Just to bring the committee's attention to the fact that the temporary ramp has actually become a permanent ramp, which is being fitted to the pavement itself. So it's actually screwed onto the pavement. And a further door on the shop frontage where the step is has been installed. That exasperates the issue. I did approach Ben Smith, who you heard a statement from, as regards whether or not, as a wheelchair user, these reasonable adjustments would be acceptable to overcome the refusal of this application. This was his reply. No, the changes would not be usable by myself. Remember that he is a wheelchair user. The ramp is similar to some units who install as a reasonable adjustment. I cannot use this incline. I would not be compliant for a new build. In effect, it would be dangerous for me, unlike the original unit, which wheelchair users could access. I can't really see how the door can be independently used. This is the new door that's been fitted, like the original unit. The sign is also useless unless a way of communicating, i.e. a buzzer. However, this is just a reasonable adjustment if the unit was an old inaccessible unit. It was fully and independently accessible before building work, and I did not require this for disabled access. My statement has been submitted and confirmed by Democratic Services. Point which I'd like to make to the committee for consideration is that people with disabilities and accessibility issues and sight loss, etc., are impacted by this retrospective application that has been live and conducting its business on Southbourne High Street since the 28th of February of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Farquhar. So, Mr. Sanders, is there anything you wanted to come back on to what's been said by?
Not specifically this time, I don't think, unless.
That's fine, thank you. So we're open up to questions. Councillor Pedderman.
Yes, I want to ask, given that this is a retrospective application, I assume there was no pre-app discussion of any kind, or was there?
No, there was not. The first we were made aware of it was a extraction unit for a previous application, and the works were underway at the time.
So the first unit was when you actually saw the works happening? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The other question is on the width of the doorway. Forgetting about the ramp and the step at the moment, is the width of the doorway wide enough to allow wheelchairs and mobility scooters and things in?
To tread carefully here, because I don't want to go over to building regulations, as these are quite set requirements within that. In the planning report, I do make mention to the width of the door, and I believe the application site front door is 840mm, and the requirement is 775mm for existing buildings. However, that is within building regulations, specifically with regard to the public sector ecology duty. We have to take it into account. It counts as part of the judgment. It's kind of separate to building regulations. What I'm taking a view on is, in terms of design, CS41, I would say, we take that into account with the decision making. Is it a positive design? Is it meeting our policy? And in this case, came to the view that it wasn't, if that makes sense. So we can kind of go over the door widths and how reasonable it is, and that does get taken into account in the planning report. But just to be very clear, I don't want to tread into specifically like building regs part and etc.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Councillor Salmon.
I just want to make sure I understand the context again with this application. To me, it seems that this application would have been refused had it not been called into committee. Is that right? That this was recommended for refusal?
It was called in regardless of the decision. So,
okay. And have you spent any additional time working on this application to present your report to committee today?
It's been slightly challenging, admittedly, because I've had to look into things like building regulations, but no more. It's part of the job.
Okay, but just to be absolutely crystal clear, had this application not been called in by Councillor Farquhar, who wishes the application to be refused, it would have already been refused.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. And
yes,
can I just ask you then, Chair? I've raised this issue before with the significant waste of council resources involved in examining applications to refuse them when a recommendation was already to refuse them. I've been told previously that this is not an abuse of council resources by a councillor, because it is down to officers to make clear to the councillor when they go to call an application in that were it to be refused, it could simply be refused and would not have to come to committee. Is it being made clear to councillors when they call applications like this in that they do have the option to withdraw that call in if the outcome they desire is achieved? And is it also being made clear to them that if it comes to committee, we could now approve this against officer recommendation? Is that being explained to councillors, or are they? Okay, so there is not a position of clear. It is absolutely made clear to councillors that this is a significant waste of council resources. Because when I do my back of an envelope calculations, I've got the cost of running this committee for one item at around 2k. When you take into account all of the officer time, all of the councillor time, I take an incredibly dim view of this. Okay, can I ask that we move on to the debate if there are no further questions then?
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, apologies, and notwithstanding Councillor Salmon's point, I do know building regs is what I do, and yeah, it was or has at any point a disability access statement been provided by the applicant for this?
I do not believe so.
Okay, so Councillor Canavan. No, if there's no more questions, then we are debate. So, Councillor Canavan.
I don't want to preempt debate unduly, but I just want to move that we refuse the application on the basis of the reasons set out in the report. But just to come back to Councillor Salmon's point,
If it's specific to the application, not.
Well, I've called planning applications in before, not knowing whether the planning officer will refuse it or not. And from my recollection on the couple that I've called in, I have not been told what the final recommendation is. So you almost have to call it in on the basis of whether it's acceptable or not, because you just don't know.
I think the point is that if you call it in conditionally, so you call it in because you want it refused, the officer refuses it, then it wouldn't no more progress.
No, I absolutely accept that, Chair, but the point at which you call it in, you don't know. You don't know whether it's
you make it conditionally.
Yeah.
Mr. Gould, did you want to clarify?
Yeah, I mean, officers will routine. I take the point that Councillor Canavan's making, that at the time they have the discussion with the case officer, they might not know whether they're going to be recommending approval or grant. So they're entitled to submit their call in. But as the chair is saying, there are two options at the bottom of the form. One is that you put a conditional call in, which would then potentially lead to a conversation when the case officer has produced their recommendation. If that recommendation accords with the councillor's view on whether the application should be approved or refused, then that calling can in theory fall away. But if it's put in unconditionally, which is like what we've got here, then no matter whatever the recommendation is, we need to bring it to committee.
But the point I'm making, Chair, is that there is no conversation. Certainly in the ones that I've dealt with, there is no conversation as to whether or not the call-in is still required, because the officer is recommending refusal. I've never been given that option.
Okay, well, I think from what Mr. Gould has said is he will take that back to his team to emphasise that the point needs to be done. So there's a recommendation for refusal from Councillor
And I'm happy to second it.
Seconded by Councillor Pedevin. Is this about, we've covered the part about calling, we don't want to go into that territory again. Okay, yeah. Any further points about the application has been recommended for refuse? So if we go to a vote now, so if you wish to refuse the application as per the officer recommendations, show now.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's unanimous.
So that is agreed. Application is refused. Thank you, Mr. Saunders. And the item 7 is the appeals report. So you see the data coming through. Basically, BCP is performing within the targets for quality of planning decisions, which is positive. Were there any comments? No. Okay, so that is the end of meeting, but if you hang around. Thank you.